January is supposed to be a quiet month around the NFL, aside from the playoffs. Not this year. We are now up to 9 head coaches, and RotoPat every single year has the head coach rankings. He's covering the news over at RotoWorld, my old stomping grounds. Love to podcast with them. You guys are going to love him today. We're going to rank our top 8 candidates, which guarantees a team is going to be hiring somebody left off our list. We did that on purpose. And then we'll also do some matchmaking at the end of this. So, RotoPat, how would you kind of grade, just this carousel this year versus years prior?
Well, at first I thought it was one of the least impressive crops of head coaching candidates I'd ever seen, just because there were no retread candidates. The Shanny and McVay trees have been pretty picked over the past few years. It's kind of been unclear, what should the third tree be? Should we getting back into the Sean Payton tree? Is there a Liam Cohen tree yet? That kind of thing, where it felt like a very transition year for the head coaching ranks. So maybe not a great year for there to be 9 openings, because it'd be really fierce competition for the guys who are at the top of the market. But I thought most of this before McDaniel joined, before Harbaugh joined, before Tomlin joined, where that's viable retread candidates. They're turning up some interesting. They're having to go further down the Shanny and McVay coaching trees, but they're finding interesting guys. And I feel a lot better about it than I did in the opening few days of the carousel. I was like, man, I do not want to have an opening this year.
Yep.
There are a lot of intriguing. It's a rare year lately where I would say the retreads are more intriguing than the new guys, maybe, which maybe isn't actually true. Maybe I'm just convincing myself that I know who these guys are, so these guys are more interesting to me. But it's a year where I would not be afraid to go back to the well with some of these guys.
Yeah, I'm not going to spoil my list right at the top, but my top 4 candidates are all retreads. And then it's a couple legacy names. You'll start recognizing some of the last names here. And then Jesse Minter's going to get a head coaching job. So I think my top 6, I feel good that those 6 are going to get head coaching opportunities here. And then it's these guys where I can't even pronounce their last names. We're that far down these Shanahan McVay trees. So let's get this thing off. I'm just curious, who do you think is the best head coach available?
I feel like half the internet will boo this. Half will probably cheer it. But I really do think it's Mike Tomlin. I also do think he's not going to take a job. But he's the guy I would at least try to get him on the phone. I would talk to the Steelers does it really need to be a first-round pick? That kind of thing. So it probably would be at this point.
Yeah.
Where Tomlin, he's such a hard guy to assess because we all know the deal. 7 straight playoff losses. Every season is kind of the same. But it seems like one of those situations where in 20 years, we'll look back and we'll be like, we really thought a guy who never once had a losing season in 19 years was overrated. That kind of thing. We were kind of probably overthinking the Tomlin thing. He's just an amazing coach. He's a guy who sometimes was a victim of his own success, I would say, the final 5 years in Pittsburgh, because the baseline is so high. He basically could not win fewer than 9 to 10 games.
Yeah.
But that meant they were never picking in the lottery. They just didn't have a straightforward way to replace Ben Roethlisberger. Obviously, they could have gone about it better than they probably did. But when you're always in the 20s, for every Jackson Dart, there's 10 Kenny Pickett's. They got one of the Kenny Pickett's. They just didn't have a foolproof way to actually get a new quarterback. But they never got a good draft pick because he kept winning 9 to 10 games.
Yep.
So I would be I would at least make Mike Tomlin say no, is how I would put it.
Yeah, I think he will end up saying no. He just wants to, podcast with Gronk on Sundays.
He wants to maybe work for Underdog.
Yeah, he might do scheme with Josh Norris. Yeah. Who knows what's going to happen there? I'd be curious to know about that just because he's a CEO type, but I know he knows the X's and O's like nobody else do. So I'm with you here where if Mike Tomlin was available, he'd be very high up the list. And the last 4 or 5 years, obviously not getting a quality quarterback is really the demise of the whole situation. But you look at the last 5 years, tell me which quarterback they actually had a chance to get. They called to try to do the Matthew Stafford stuff. I'm sure they were trying to get all the other available guys in the draft, but there was just never one that really kind of fell to them. I think maybe this year they should have just drafted Dart at 20th overall or whatever it was. But Derek Harmon's going to be a good player. But really, what was Dart going to do this year to kind of save this thing around? So I think take a year off, evaluate the landscape, go hang out with Gronk and Terry Bradshaw for a season until that gets old, and then eventually he'll come back to us.
It's going to definitely be Fox, by the way, where he goes. They seem to have a pipeline for these kind of guys. But the quarterback thing, too, they should have taken Dart, as you said. But when you're taking a quarterback in that 20 to 32 range, Like that is really the danger zone, because that's telling you, obviously the league did not value them as a top 10 pick, as a lottery pick. And then I feel like you either want to take your quarterbacks in the top 10, really more the top 5, or then like the second to third round, the Russell Wilson zone, the Derek Carr zone. That was maybe one thing they could have done differently. They probably should have taken another one or two day 2 or 3 quarterbacks, and just kind of like what the Eagles did, just like always consider quarterback not solved. And they were maybe a little uncreative there, but I think about Mike Tomlin. I would have preferred Mike Tomlin over John Harbaugh, by the way, just because I feel like Harbaugh is so prepared, as anyone who's read that old ESPN article knows, like kind of like the totally fanatical lengths he goes to get ready. Just on Sundays, I feel like Tomlin's a little more involved in the X's and O's than Harbaugh is. And Harbaugh seems to be a pretty good players coach, Lamar notwithstanding. But Tomlin just seems like the ultimate players coach to me. And those are kind of the things where I would have put Tomlin ahead of Harbaugh.
Yeah, I agree with Tomlin over Harbaugh. I left Tomlin off my list, just assuming that he's not going to take this. So let's move on to the next names here. So who's up next for you?
Well, they're not necessarily in order. But
okay.
Of these 9 openings, because it's still 9, like as of this recording, John Harbaugh is keeping the Giants waiting quite a long time. It might be 8 by the time people are listening to this. I'm going to go fantasy and bio. I'm going to say Mike McDaniel.
Yes.
And I'm just going to, it's one of those things where clearly so many teams want him to be their play caller. The price is going to be, you have to hire him as head coach, is what I think is happening. Like, I know probably all of these teams would prefer him as an offensive coordinator. There's just too much competition. You're going to have to pay the price of making him the head coach. And what I come back to with Mike McDaniel is, I don't know if this is like an imperfect apples to oranges type thing, but what is really the difference between Mike McDaniel and Matt LaFleur? Like Matt LaFleur, widely celebrated, regarded as a great head coach. To me, though, he's just Mike McDaniel in a stable organization. And who knows how Mike McDaniel really does in the locker room and all that. I wouldn't be shocked if it were not great. But Mike McDaniel, I feel like he could be a LaFleur type if he could just get in a stable organization. The Dolphins, one of the more dysfunctional teams in the league. What he did, a totally imperfect situation. Maybe he could have done more. It didn't win a playoff game, but making the playoffs twice, making Tua what he was. I feel like, too, I like McDaniel's. I don't know why I'm bringing LaFleur into this, but like I understand when I'm watching a Dolphins game, like McDaniel's theory of the game. I don't even necessarily understand LaFleur's theory of the game. Sometimes I know he's a great play designer, but basically I just think LaFleur's maybe a bit overrated and McDaniel's very underrated at this point, kind of where he was. And I don't know why I dragged LaFleur into this. I just feel like we like LaFleur. We should like McDaniel a lot more, and maybe as much as we like LaFleur.
Mike McDaniel is easily my favorite head coaching candidate. I would be treating this as a blessing that the Dolphins let him go if I was another one of his teams. First of all, his career winning percentage, which I think is probably a little bit of an overrated stat, but it is over 50%. And that was like not like the cleanest of environments there. When he had like healthy Tua over the last 3 years, that's a top 5 offense, and nobody's rushing to sign a Tua who might get cut this year to to add $99 million in dead cap. It's a really impressive thing that he's done there. Everyone does seem to like him. I think that was the one thing is like, do players like really want to go to war with them? I don't know. They finished that last season really strongly when they had nothing to play for. I think was another feather in his cap. And I think the history of us trying to pretend that like these coaches don't have the it factor is pretty bad. Like this last year, the Liam Cohen presser, everyone dragged him. The Dan Campbell presser, everyone dragged him. And then I would say even Ben Johnson, like the whole thing with Ben Johnson is like, is he a leader of men type? And then of course, like it's one of the best offenses in the league immediately. So I think right now, Mike McDaniel, he needs to get rid of the capris. He probably needs to bench press more because he's got the same height as Sean McVay. Sean McVay is like built like a brick house. I think if he solves those issues, we wouldn't be talking about this. And to me, those are just like fake tough guy things to talk about when you're away from the facility. I'm guessing that all the players do love him. And I know for a fact, he's one of the best play callers, not just in the pass game, which he figured out with Tua, but the ground game this year with, identifying Brewer, getting Patrick Paul in the building, using those guys in space. That is a really impressive showing to me, doing it with a very small running back himself. So he, to me, is the best head coaching candidate by far.
And my final 2 thoughts on McDaniel. The only reason I wasn't sure about the locker room thing is, Tyreek, but that's alpha wide receiver behavior, of course. And I can never even tell if Tyreek actually didn't like him or not. I thought it was a bad sign when Vic Fangio was with him for 1 year. Like, I got to get out of here. Like,
Yeah,
that made me a little worried. Like maybe
Yep.
McDaniel actually is immature, like not ready, just a play caller trapped in a head coach's body. But you hit on the most important data point by far. I mean, the Dolphins were a laughing stock in October of this year. It seemed like the prime candidate of a team just mail it in, phone it in. Instead, they did the exact opposite. They go on like a 6-game winning streak, closed very strong. And like you said, the rest of the team does seem ready to go to battle for Mike McDaniel, which you would not guess by looking at it. He does. Every time he loses, he needs to stop like returning with a more expensive hoodie the next week.
Yes.
I don't know what that's all about.
Yeah.
But I would be very excited for my team to recycle Mike McDaniel.
Yeah, once you start talking about like style choices with coaches, I think that you're probably overlooking this because
you might be a little too far down the road.
yeah, because Belichick, one of the worst dressed humans of all time, seemed to know a thing or two until he didn't.
Yes.
All right, who's up next for you?
I've got some. These are not necessarily. They're sort of ranked. They're more tiered. Okay. I'll go. I guess my top new guy. And he's not even that new because he's a nepo name. He's a son. Being a son is always a huge qualification in the NFL. But Klint Kubiak, I just think if I'm starting a coaching staff from scratch, I want to go to the Shanny and McVay tree. That's at least the first place I look. Mm-hmm. Klint Kubiak is the most credible Shanny McVay disciple right now. He's the most experienced. He seems to be doing something a little new with the system. He's building on things that have been done in the past, like Sam Darnold coming from Minnesota to Seattle and just kind of not just picking up where he left off, adding like new elements to his game. Like Klint, you can laugh because just another son. That guy's been kicking around for a while too. Like he's not old, but he's actually been around a while. Kind of never really stuck anywhere for that long, but this is where you look. There's a reason teams look to the McVay Shanny tree first. It keeps having success. I think he's the most credible candidate from that tree. And Klint Kubiak maybe wouldn't be the most inspiring. I think he would immediately establish credibility, establish a baseline. He's kind of the coordinators who I would be most interested in this year.
Yeah, so in 2023, he spent a season directly with Shanahan. And then with the Saints, remember, that's when Derek Carr in the first month went absolutely crazy. And I thought Rashid Shaheed was playing really well. You had the downfield passing attack, and that offensive line was a stone cold disaster. They ended up having Derek Carr retire on them. And then last year, making it work with Sam Darnold, I think having a pretty open mind with how to utilize JSN as well. And I missed on him hugely in fantasy because I just did not see him operating in the Kubiak way. And obviously Kubiak just knows more ball than I do and was able to work down the field with JSN. So I thought that offensive line was also very up and down. He's kind of been able to navigate that at times. So I think that he's a really good option. He's my 6th option in my list.
He probably should have been lower for me.
But he was one of the guys in my sheet here that's color coded in green. I would be shocked if he did not get a head coaching job. So there's I think 6 names I feel very confident. Kubiak is one of them. He just runs the offense that's winning in the NFL right now. And I do think that this is the right time. He's age 38.
My 2 final thoughts on Kubiak were a really overlooked data point for him is those first 2 games for the Saints last year, where there were reports after those 2 games, all the stuff that was working, they just kind of stopped doing for some reason. I don't know if Derek Carr wasn't comfortable with it or something, but that could have been even better for him than it looked last year. And the danger with Kubiak, of course, is that it's afterglow from Mike McDaniel, who seems to be a genuinely elite head coach. That would be the danger. But I think Klint Kubiak's definitely a flyer worth taking.
Yeah, I think he's going to get a job. I don't know where it's going to be. I can see him doing the Raiders thing. I think that the Falcons would be after him. The Titans, I think, will be after him. But I think he's not going to have to take the Cardinals and the Browns jobs. I think he's going to get one of these decent enough jobs where you have a fighting chance there. And I do think that he deserves a couple years calling plays and kind of just being a leader over there just because the last 3 stints have been pretty solid for him. I'll throw out a name for you. This is my number 2 name. I'm going Kevin Stefanski, 2-time coach of the year. And I know it's a silly award. I'm not actually basing that that has a bunch of merit, but he just dealt with so much shit over the years that you have to think if you're one of these operations where you actually have half of a clue. I'll throw out the Falcons where Kevin Stefanski seems to be a current favorite there. You just have to feel better that your infrastructure is better and that Kevin Stefanski can get back to you just dialing up the right play calls where I think he has a lot more creativity than a lot of the other coaches. So it's not exactly the McVay Shanahan tree. You're seeing a little bit more college kind of influences. You see the huge Njoku parts of his career. Then you have the huge fan in part for this year. He's kind of done it without a true number one wide receiver for a while. And then Amari Cooper, he had his best seasons. Baker Mayfield, before his arm fell off, started kind of popping off. So I think a lot of these players have had some of their best years with Kevin Stefanski. He's been a head coach for a long time. And then I also do think that he's one of these. Is he an above average play caller? Maybe so, but you know that you're actually getting legit chops. You're not going to embarrass yourself out there. So I would love to interview him to make sure that he wasn't the one bringing in Deshaun Watson and those type of things. I really don't think he is. He doesn't have no faults from what happens with the Browns, but I do think you get a better operation around him. I do think that his play calling is going to shine.
I absolutely think in a year where there's 9 vacancies, it would be foolish for Kevin Stefanski not to get one of them. He was like my 5th or 6th. The only thing there is, he's given up play calling duties each of the past 2 years. That is
at gunpoint, maybe though.
Yeah, I know. It's just that was a bit of a strange red flag. And if he's not a play calling superstar, we don't really know about the other stuff. I feel like to hire Kevin Stefanski, you need to be sure he's really like a play calling superstar. He's a game designing superstar. Like he's got genuine game. I think he probably does, and he's the guy where he's just so hard to separate from his circumstances. And this is the only other thing that he gets credit for the Baker season, but he's not the only guy who ended up having a Baker season. He got credit for reviving Joe Flacco. He's not the only guy who's done that now. So I just wonder if maybe like some of the things that seemed like were all Stefanski were maybe just more environment luck maybe than we thought. But I totally agree. A guy who can have any success, even if it's only 2 years in that Browns environment, is 100% worthy of a second chance. I would feel comfortable with my team going back to the Stefanski well.
Yeah, reports right now, it's the Falcons are rumored to be the favorites, assuming Harbaugh does go to the New York Giants. And I think that would be a decent enough pairing. Like he's got a lot of weapons to work with. I think Kyle Pitts will most likely get franchise tags. You have London Bijan Pitts with Kevin Stefanski, who's done a lot with very similar players there. Obviously, like the Nick Chubbs of it. I was just going back. Stefanski, before he was a head coach, he was dealing with Zimmer for like 6 straight years. So maybe you just like bring him to like an organization where there's like more flowers, the city's prettier and stuff. He can like, maybe like put on a smile every once in a while. Handsome fellow. So hopefully better days are ahead for Kevin Stefanski.
The Falcons too, they're one of those organizations who kind of scan as dysfunctional, but I actually don't think they are. They seem like they try to do the right thing. Right. And they just have not had luck identifying what the right thing is.
It's hard to find quarterbacks, man. It just keeps coming back to that. If you're in the Mariota, Ritter, Penix, Kirk Cousins, just spinning that wheel, it's never going to end well for you, no matter who the play caller is. All right, give me another name.
I've got another retread. I thought about going with Jesse Minter here instead. I'm going to go one more retread. And I don't know if I would have said this a year ago, but Robert Saleh, who I do think he's the one guy we actually aren't sure if he'll get a job. But I feel like he's a big picture guy who just got screwed in a place with the Jets where there's never a big picture. It's always this moment to moment. What's the next get rich quick scheme? Who's the next savior? Like how can anyone have success in the environment? No one has. So I don't know if we can really hold that against him. One of the smartest organizations, one of the smartest coaches in the league, the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan, couldn't wait to get him back.
Yep.
He's duct tape and gluing a defense that has just been destroyed by injuries this year. I think the players like him. I want the Ravens to get an offensive play calling head coach. I want the Ravens to get a guy who can basically be Lamar's personal quarterbacks coach. But if they don't go offense side of the ball, I would love for the Ravens to go Robert Saleh. There's just something about him to me that screams that Ravens mentality, that Ravens mindset, like defense first, confidence, a bit of a swagger, really. And I think a guy who he's hard to judge because of how horrible the situation he was in. But most of his tenure, that defense was great too. Mm-hmm. And Saleh, a guy I think flying a little bit under the radar this time that I really would like to see get a second chance.
Yeah, he had multiple seasons with the Jets where he had top 12 scoring defenses, and then all of his stints with the 49ers have been excellent. I think that this year he's really helped himself. Like you can tell all the players love him. He's super fired up. A bunch of players we've never even heard of are not only just making plays, but they run a lot of zone defense and they're communicating well. They hit really well. They seem fired up and ready to play. And the fact that we're even waiting to watch this game this weekend is a credit that he's been able to hold the line without any pass rusher that can win one-on-one. So Robert Saleh was actually my first name left off my list. He would be my 9th name if I was doing the top 8 or top 10. And I do think that he easily could get a job depending on how I don't think he would take, the Browns jobs or the Cardinals jobs. I think he's above that. He's learned his lesson with the Jets. So can he sneak one by the Steelers, the Ravens, the Raiders once again? I do think that's the tier for him. And I think that he's going to probably get another head coaching job eventually. And this might be the year now that there's 9 names.
But I'm glad you agree the Cardinals are, if not the worst, not one
Brutal.
of the worst, maybe the worst. I think they actually are the worst opening. Kind of underrated for how truly dysfunctional that organization is.
Yeah, how I have my list is the bottom 2 is very clearly the Cardinals and the Browns. And
100%. I ranked them just as a little prep for the show. I have 8 Cardinals, 7 Browns.
Yeah, it's a disaster over there. I think even like the Dolphins and the Raiders and like those teams have not been winning. They're not a great organizations themselves. They easily clear the bar that you have with the Cardinals and the Browns there.
They seem like they want to win. I kind of lump the Raiders in with the Falcons, or the Raiders on the surface seem like the most dysfunctional organization.
Yep.
Mark Davis desperately wants to win. He's willing to put people in charge. Like, he's not meddling, but he just keeps making the wrong decision on the people he puts in charge.
Yeah. And we talk about it's hard to find a quarterback. You have a path to have Mendoza. If Mendoza is as good as everyone thinks he is, then you've solved one of the most difficult riddles in the NFL. So I think the Raiders job is, fairly attractive. Okay, I'll throw a retread your way. My number 3 candidate is Brian Flores. And I want to put a big asterisk on this because when you're suing the NFL, coaches may not like you. There was obviously some disagreements going on with the Dolphins players, namely Tua. Did Tomlin say anything wrong about his evaluation of Tua?
No.
I'm not sure about that. But Brian Flores, I do know this. When you watch the games on Sundays, Brian Flores is going to dominate every below average defense and offense. It's not even going to be close. You feel his impact on the game every single Sunday. He has a kind of out of bounds style defense that kind of runs counter to everything, where he's super aggressive. Always, he's like double the blitz rate over like the average NFL defense. But on top of that, he's also doing the too high shell coverage scam at the same exact time. So he's bringing pressure. You don't know where it's coming. Like Andrew Van Ginkel turns into one of the most important players every single week for some reason. That's hard to do. All of these things, lots of communication. Brian Flores is one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL. He might even be top 3 for me. He's been a head coach before over his last 2 seasons with the Dolphins. He was also 19 and 14. So he wasn't like a terrible either there. So you would have to interview him. You'd have to get to the bottom of this just to kind of go back to the legal part of this. He's suing the NFL because he didn't want to tank. Is that such a bad thing? And then also racial interview, just kind of phoniness going on, which I think he also had a very good case. So yeah, it's never
some smoking gun evidence.
Yes, absolutely. So of the things to be suing, your potential employers for, he does seem to have some reasonable cases in both of those too. So yes, you have to interview him and make sure things are all right. But I do think Brian Flores is a great year for him to get back to the head coaching ranks.
I absolutely do. I had him in my top 8. It was a little lower, but Brian Flores, the first bar for any head coach, I feel like, unless you're one of the best CEOs out there, like John Harbaugh, the first bar any head coach needs to clear for me is, do you make an impact on your side of the ball? Brian Flores inarguably makes an impact on his defensive side of the ball. Like, he's just a difference maker. A head coach has to have an edge of some sort beyond just leadership or whatever. He's a huge edge on defense, his side of the ball. The red flags, the interpersonal stuff, he did nothing wrong with Tua, as we just pointed out. But he does kind of the gruff Belichick thing without really having the purchase or the leeway to do that. I would say where you need to win a little more before you do that. And you mentioned Mike Zimmer earlier. I had several Dolphins friends who would make a very Zimmer-type complaint about Brian Flores. For he coaches it's illegal to win by more than 3 points. Or it's illegal to score more than 20 points. Just shockingly conservative. Maybe some years with Kevin O'Connell and then McVay's system have opened his eyes a little bit. But that was maybe his biggest weakness as a head coach, was so conservative. Maybe that era of football is kind of fading as we're seeing analytics and aggressiveness becoming the norm, not just Dan Campbell. But that was, I think, the thing that held him back the most, the Dolphins. Dude, you got to play as if you're trying to score 35 points, not 20 points. And I think that's an area where he could very easily grow. I totally agree. Brian Flores is one of the top 8 candidates this year.
And I think the further you go down the list, I think the more, say the ownership and then the GM could have and be like, hey, we want you to be the head coach, but guess what? You're turning over your fourth down decision-making to a 22-year-old who knows our studio, that's
Brian Flores. Have you ever heard of Hayden Winks?
Yeah. Guess what? I'm calling the shots now. It's one of those situations where I do think you just say, I'm signing up for a top 10 defense. And then I know you have some other things that are kind of in the con column. We're gonna handle those ourselves. So I think that's kind of the case for Brian Flores. The fact that he's getting head coaching interviews once again, and like a decent amount of them, does make me feel like his odds of actually landing one of these is a little bit higher than I thought going into this, where there was probably gonna be like 5 or 6 openings. Now you get to 9. Now it's like, okay, it's like Flores and his lawsuit, or like a 34-year-old defensive coordinator who happens to have like the last name of a legacy head coach,
And he's like the ultimate fallback coach. And when there's 9 openings, several teams are going to need their fallback option. Like, all right, we didn't get, Mike Tomlin, we didn't get John Harbaugh. At least we can get Flores. I think that does bode. And if not this year for Brian Flores, it might never happen.
Yeah, he might need to settle this lawsuit. Maybe that's like his next best thing. All right, throw out a name to me.
This guy probably should have been the top new candidate, Jesse Minter. And sometimes I'm like, am I just following the crowd on this? What do I even truly know about Jesse Minter? I guess what I know is he's had an elite defense 2 years in a row. He's someone who, there's been so much innovation on the offensive side of the ball the past 10 to 15 years. The innovation has been kind of swinging back to the defensive side of the ball. He seems to be on the vanguard of that. He's tapped into something on the quote-unquote forgotten side, and just really, really imposing unit there with the Chargers. He's worked for like all the right people.
Yep.
Who Harbaugh, and similar. He's like this year's Mike McDaniel, right down to like working for Harbaugh and like coaching at Michigan, and just like the innovation right now, the innovative energy after all those years in offense seems to be on defense. He has it, and he'd be a first-time head coach I'd be very willing to take a flyer on, and probably more so. I probably should have had him ahead of Klint Kubiak, but I'm an offensive guy at heart.
Yeah, I am too, but I had Jesse Minter as my top non-retread candidate this year, and he's going to get a job. He was excellent at the 2 years at Michigan as well, and they obviously had to prove his point that they weren't just like stealing plays.
Signs.
Yeah, but I don't think that they were doing that with the Chargers. And guess what? If you can steal signs for 4 straight years, at a certain point, you just gotta be like, we're stealing some signs. That's the past, Yeah. So I think he's dodged those allegations. I remember watching him. I forget, it might have been like Penix or somebody. It was like because I don't watch a bunch of college football until like it's prospect season. And I turned on the Michigan defense tape because I was watching one of the quarterback prospects. And I couldn't believe how many different defenses that they were throwing on. They had a bunch of the top prospects just completely brain in the blender. So I think he's going to get a job. I think that the Chargers defense this year, they didn't have really anybody. Like, you had like an old Khalil Mack, and then like Tony Jefferson at safety. Like out of retirement, you had a bunch of like really young corners. Everyone really likes the new linebacker that they've developed, but I think that he gets part of the developmental credit on top of that. And then Derwin James kind of went silent there with Staley, and Derwin James has made more impact the last couple of years. So I think the whole thing with defense right now is, what's your pressure package? I think that Brian Flores is the top there. And then it's all about zone defense. Like, no one's doing the Belichick. We have the top corner in the league, and we're just playing man coverage. It's zone defense communication. I think that Jesse Minter has done that a ton. So he's going to get a job. He's my number 5 candidate. I think my favorite non-retread.
The only thing I would say on Minter is, even though Jim Harbaugh, literally a former NFL quarterback, is an offensive mind, I sometimes do wonder how much of this is Harbaugh, how much of this is his assistant. Because Harbaugh's maybe the best organized coach in all of American football. Like, so fundamentally sound, always has an elite defense wherever he is. But I'm sure Minter, though, I think he just is good at identifying coaching talent. And Jesse Minter was the latest great defensive coordinator he identified.
We keep mentioning Harbaugh, Jim Harbaugh. Did you rank John Harbaugh? I had him fourth. So I went McDaniel, Stefanski, Flores, and then I would have Harbaugh there. Then I would get into Minter. Did you have Harbaugh, or would he have been your top guy?
I had him off the board because I thought he was off the board. But
where would you kind of slide him in?
Top three. I think I would rather have Tomlin. I think I would even rather have McDaniel, which again maybe is branding me as the ultimate fantasy and bio guy. But then Harbaugh, I have to be like, listen, if I'm going to give if I'm going to give Tomlin credit for having such a high baseline, I need to do the same with John Harbaugh. And I just need to trust that a guy having that much success over 17, 18 years or whatever, that it wasn't just a fluke. And that I don't necessarily know what makes Harbaugh special, but that's because I'm not in the locker room. I'm not running an NFL team. And at some point, the sample size is big enough. You really do get the benefit of the doubt, and Harbaugh gets the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I think the one thing about Harbaugh that just stands out, and I was listening to Nate Tice, who, if you know the last name Tice, his dad, knows a thing or two about coaching. He was saying that Harbaugh's staff is one of the highest paid staffs, and that's why, like, all the way down to the assistant coaches are like the best assistant. Like, they're going to have the best wide receivers coach versus the other teams out there. And I do think there's something to that. When you've been in the league for so long, you're going to be able to make the most phone calls, the best high quality phone calls, where if you are the CEO type, I want you to be an older CEO type because your just phone book is a lot denser. And I do think that he gets a lot of credit. So I think the rumor was like 5 years, $100 million for Harbaugh, which is a lot of money.
It is.
And I do know that his staff is also going to be amongst the very top. So that's why he's only going to be a fit for so many teams. But I do think there is something to that. We've mentioned like the inexperienced, and we're going to get to a bunch of inexperienced NFL members that are up for these jobs. The difference between Harbaugh's, phone calls versus these young guys has to be pretty substantial. And I do think that ends up mattering.
The only danger there is hopefully he doesn't get too stuck. Pete Carroll, like, he went outside his tree occasionally in Seattle, but near the end they stopped going outside their tree as much.
Belichick too.
And hopefully Harbaugh just doesn't. I coached this guy in Baltimore. Trust me, great. Like, are you sure, coach? Yeah, just trust me, man.
Yeah.
Harbaugh does not seem like that kind of guy. Harbaugh does not seem like a rest on his laurels. Harbaugh is as prepared as they come. And I think the Giants can trust him to assemble an elite staff.
There's also a really interesting column from Justice Mosqueda about the Packers, and he just looked at the experience from the assistant coaches.
I saw that.
And the Packers' inexperience at assistant coach was shocking. And he was saying,
through, I would say.
It does shine through. And I think that might be like the difference we start to like learn is like, why do some of these teams just kind of like hit a point where it's hard to like figure out exactly why this team's kind of stuck. I do think that could be one. And the Packers, not having an owner, maybe that's where the problem is you can't pay these damn coaches. Yeah, very interesting. But go read that column. It was pretty eye-opening to me. All right, hit me with another name.
Well, we're getting in. You said we weren't going to know how to pronounce everyone's name. I know Josh can pronounce this guy's name. The Panthers defensive coordinator. Do you know how to say it?
Evero.
Ejiro Evero.
That'll work. That'll work.
I do apologize to Mr. Evero, but
he listens.
So you're at the part of the board now. You have to start taking some risks. And Evero is the kind of guy where he's worked for all the right people. He worked for Sean McVay. He worked for Jim Harbaugh, I believe. He's had some pretty big returns with some not amazing setups in Carolina. That does not include 2024, where the Panthers defense was like a tire fire, basically. 2 of the past 3 years, though, say a Panthers defense that the whole was very much greater than the sum of its parts. It held that team together down the stretch this year. And sometimes, why is this guy getting so much attention? Why is this guy getting interviews? And you just kind of have to trust like the crowd at that point. Like league circles know who might be a little better than you might assume just based on their team's win-loss records, all that. And you just have to kind of trust there's a reason Evero is getting some hype, getting some steam. And then you can also just trust that with your own eyes. Like this Panthers defense was better than I think the personnel suggested it should be this year.
Yep.
And yet we're taking risks at this part of the board. And he's a risk. If I miss out, a year with so many good retreads, you would be disappointed to have to take a risk like this. But if we're taking a risk, I think this might be one worth taking.
I did not have Evero on my short list, but I think he just kind of falls in that big bucket of a bunch of no-namers.
Yes.
And he's got at least a little bit bigger of a name than some of the other ones that are being thrown out there. But you have connections to McVay. He's been a DC for multiple seasons in a row.
He's been a DC for multiple organizations, too.
That's good, too. Yeah. And I thought just this last week, the Panthers, Mike Jackson and J.C. Horn, 2 safeties, I do think those guys had really quality seasons. And their defense did take a big jump up front, getting Derek Brown back. So I think that he's an interesting name. I'll throw out one pretty similar in Chris Shula. Chris Shula, obviously, you know the name Shula. He's 40 years old. You feel his presence at the same exact time. He had Sam Darnold absolutely just tapping out for multiple halves there throughout this season. And I think he does a lot of the same things that we talked about with Minter, just like a lot of zone defense, kind of making the most out of a situation, which, let's just be honest here, like start naming the back 7 players on the Rams defense. It's linebackers you've never heard of that they keep extending because they like them. Quentin
and then it's
Lake.
guys like people you have heard of that you wish you had, Emmanuel Forbes.
Emmanuel Forbes, yeah, Kilo Witherspoon, like these types of guys who've been largely very up and down, but these guys have also been like making interceptions and like making some big plays. Byron Young, he's the other defensive lineman next to Jared Verse. He's a monster, man, and he was somebody that was like an athletic freak without a bunch of college production, and then all of a sudden, guess what? Here comes the NFL production. I do think that he deserves some of that as well. So I think that he's, kind of waited his turn long enough. He's at least a little bit older than some of the other coaches that have been NFL guys. And I do feel like this zone communication defense that, the kind of Vic Fangio type of defense is where the NFL is at. And I do think that Chris Shula did a good job of operating in that this year.
My only thing with Shula is he is a bit older. Like you said, like why didn't this guy break out until he was Sean McVay's defensive coordinator? And McVay, of course, an offensive play caller. But McVay, I put him in the old Belichick bucket, the old Pete Carroll bucket, the Harbaugh, Tomlin bucket, where he's setting the tone on both sides of the ball. And I just wonder how much of this is Sean McVay's innovative energy. He's not calling the plays, so Chris Shula deserves a lot of credit for that. But it's how much of this is Sean McVay's like restless, innovative energy, and how much of it is Chris Shula would be where I would be leery there.
Yeah, I think my counter to that would be Raheem Morris was in there a couple years ago. He was the play caller. He leaves for the Falcons head coaching job. That's when they had Aaron Donald. Since then, the Rams defense has actually gotten better statistically. This was like a top 5 defense without insane. Aaron Donald. Like that's, and obviously you hit on Jared Verse, you hit on Byron Young. Their defensive tackles have been really good as well. But I think there's something that like Raheem Morris, he just kind of outcoached the Raheem Morris defense, and Raheem Morris was able to get a head coaching job. So he would be somebody I do think he might be able to squeeze a head coaching job this
Shula too. He deserves credit in the fact that he got hired by Sean McVay. Sean McVay doesn't hire just anybody. And if you get hired by Sean McVay, there's a pretty good sign he thinks you're an innovative big thinker. So that's another bullet point in his favor. Okay.
Do you have any other kind of no-namers out there?
I do. Just go to the offensive guy for the Rams. Yeah. Do you have any idea to pronounce this guy's name?
Scheelhaase.
I was going to say Scheelhaase.
He's probably Scheelhaase. I think
Nate Scheelhaase. We're sorry, Nate. We have absolutely zero idea how to pronounce your name.
Sounds like a DJ from Europe somewhere.
He really does. This guy's playing in Austria this weekend, and this is just trusting in that Sean McVay knows what he's doing. And Scheelhaase isn't calling the plays or whatever. He's not even the coordinator, right? He's just the passing game coordinator, I believe.
Yes.
But McVay just gets these guys ready. Like, has there been a single notable dud? I mean, maybe Zach Taylor, but Zach Taylor went to a Super Bowl. And like McVay he just knows what he's doing. He knows who he's hiring. And you kind of just have to trust that this guy's on McVay's staff for a reason. This guy is trusted by Sean McVay for a reason. At some point, there's probably going to be a huge disaster, a huge dud, where you just force to hire a guy just isn't ready, truly. But if I don't know what to do at head coach, I really do. I look like, who does Sean McVay have working?
That's the best we got.
That seems like as good of approach as any.
Yep. Yeah, I was listening to Robert Mays and Connor Orr, and Connor Orr was telling a good story about how at Iowa State, he rose up the ranks so quickly, made such a great impression when they thought their head coach was going to keep leaving, and they knew that he was going to be their answer there, and that they absolutely loved him. And then McVay poaches him, and then McVay absolutely loves him. So he's been an offensive coordinator at Iowa State, series program, like Brock Purdy years, like that type of stuff. And then McVay for a couple of years here, pass game coordinator. I think they do a lot of cool stuff where all the motion stuff, I do think he has his hands on at least some of that. And like Puka Nacua is not just like winning go balls by himself all the time. Like they're doing a lot of stuff to kind of keep him balanced. Obviously, Devontae Adams in the red area as well. So they do a lot of cool stuff. So I do think that he's my number 8 option. And I would not be surprised if he can kind of squeeze in here. I really hope that these guys, they know that they're so young that they don't have to take the Cardinals jobs, the Browns job. I think like for these last couple of names that we've been hitting on, it's the I would say the Titans, Steelers, Raiders, Dolphins tier.
Yes.
I think that they should accept those, and then let's, retreads that we have not named, take the Cardinals and the Browns. And there's a lot of that kind of next tier. Like I'll throw out like, Vance Joseph, Steve Spagnuolo, Arthur Smith, Cliff Kingsbury, like those type. Raheem Morris.
Say his name. You haven't said the number 1.
Matt Nagy.
No, not even him. Even crazy. Mike McCarthy.
McCarthy. I didn't even write. I have 20 names down. I did not name McCarthy, but he would probably be another one of these guys. So I think that's probably, we had a lot of the same names in the top 8. I'm not surprised by that. Was there like anyone that's like getting head coach interviews that just, aside from McCarthy, that's just like, why the hell are we doing this? Nagy's mine.
Well, Jeff Hafley. I mean, do you understand quite what's going on there?
I don't get this one, man. Like he was good at Boston College. Like, is that a good answer for me to
If he were 36 instead of 46, I'm like, whatever. It didn't work out at Boston College. It doesn't work out for anyone at Boston College. But yeah, when you're 46 and that's kind of like the highlight of your resume, and just looking like a Micah Parsons merchant this year.
Yes.
As soon as Micah Parsons he at least knew what to do with Micah Parsons. Even that you can't take for granted.
Sure.
But the Hafley thing, talk about something that lost steam as the season wore on. And that would be a pretty lean hire, in my opinion, if my team were hiring Jeff Hafley.
Yeah, I think I would rather do the Vance Joseph or Steve Spagnuolo or Robert Saleh thing. I think like those.
You just like bet on experience with someone. Yeah,
right.
Like this guy, he's been around forever. He knows everyone. Yeah. Maybe he's finally learned like enough lessons where they can just run a football team. Yeah.
You have like a old school Rams obsession. I just wanted to throw out a quick question. Steve Spagnuolo, the last 7 years he's been a defense coordinator with the Chiefs. They've been top 10 in scoring 6 of the 7 years. They've obviously had some star players, but this was not like a defense dominated team over there. And you can feel his impact. Like one of the criteria that you had is, can you feel his impact? Go watch any playoff game with the Chiefs and tell me you don't have a Steve Spagnuolo impact. I know his tenure with the Rams was so disastrous. Can you remind me? Because I was an infant at the time. Can you remind me what happened? Why isn't he getting any serious run as a head coach again?
I think he was a bit of a deer in headlights as a CEO, where not a whole lot of fire. Didn't really seem like he knew what he was doing, dealing with the media. Not that that's a big part of the job, but he was a guy. He was always like very polite in his press conferences. Like, this isn't good. Like this guy's like not even upset. Like he almost strikes me, even though he like looks and seems like so much more of a football guy, he strikes me sometimes as like the Shanny caricature. Like this guy would just rather be in his offense, drawing up cool blitzes right now than like actually leading the team. But he draws up some really cool blitzes. The players do really respect him. The final 10 years of St. Louis Rams football, they were majorly leaguing them. All right, they didn't want to win. Yeah. They were trying not to win. It was a conspiracy. I can go on. It wasn't actually a conspiracy. I don't think.
It's the truth.
Yeah, true. It's the truth. Winning was not the priority. He did not win.
No, they didn't win basically at all. I've seen like 2-13s, 2-14s if you look up his Pro Football Reference. So,
it's the one. By the way, the one stone I feel like we didn't overturn here is they're just not a college guy. Like I would have called Marcus Freeman. I think teams did call Marcus Freeman, but he seems to have too much unfinished business at Notre Dame. I haven't heard anyone calling Dan Lanning. I haven't heard anyone calling Kurt Signetti. I would at least maybe call him. But just an uncertain year, especially before all these retreads came in. I was like, man, the first thing I'm doing is at least calling this elite college coaches, but it doesn't seem like they're in the mix this year.
I think that's a very good point. No one's calling for Lincoln Riley. I'll answer the phone for you if you guys want.
I even would call Lincoln Riley though. Like, this guy's better than Cliff. Just call him.
I could agree with that. Yeah. Okay, let's do a quick just kind of matchmaking here. Let's assume Giants and Harbaugh. I'm going to kind of go off my pecking order of like the top openings. Baltimore Ravens. Is it Jesse Minter? Is it Flores? Shula? Is it somebody else? Who do you kind of? I'm thinking Jesse Minter for the Ravens. What do you?
I'm feeling Robert Saleh. I just am feeling Robert Saleh there. Where There's something about him that just screams Baltimore Ravens football to me, and I'm saying Robert Saleh to the Ravens.
Okay, let's do that. I like that because I want to give him a job. I think, and he's not going to take one of these BS jobs. So let's do Saleh there. So Giants with the Harbaugh was my number 2 opening. Number 3 opening for me is the Tennessee Titans. I'm a believer in Cam Ward, not the craziest division either. I was kind of earmarking like Mike McDaniel for this one or Klint Kubiak. I think go offense here.
They need to go offense. I would be, for some reason, Stefanski kind of strikes me as the guy there, but the Titans are one of the only teams almost as dysfunctional as the Browns. Like they have like true like ownership drama even, where I feel like they still aren't even entirely sure who the point person is.
Yeah.
But McDaniel, Stefanski, that would be a really good outcome for them. Kubiak, that's just a little too similar to Brian Callahan for me. Like Kubiak is the kind of guy, I think he needs to go to like a strong organization. Not that there's many strong organizations here, but Kubiak just seems like the classic. They're back on the market 2 years if he ends up in some place with as poor of an infrastructure as Tennessee. I guess they do have the quarterback is the huge difference there.
We think.
Yeah.
We don't know. We
don't
think.
know.
We're hopeful.
We do not know.
I think for the Titans, they're also trying to, sell some season tickets. And I don't think that you sell out because of Kubiak.
No.
I do think you could probably sell, some tickets with Mike McDaniel. I think a lot of people do really like him. So I'll stay fancy for the Falcons just because there's a report I wanted to get to. So let's do Tennessee Titans, Mike McDaniel. I think that would be a good outcome for everyone.
He'd look interesting on billboards in Nashville. It's kind of a weird town. Like he's associated with scoring points.
Yep.
We're moving into a dome. Like this guy knows how to score points.
Yep. Dome in Tennessee. I'm not sure. I like the domes, but I like the domes. Like the Buffalo Bills can have a dome. The Tennessee Titans, there's not that much weather there. Come on, they can survive. Could they not all look exactly the same?
I know. I'm scandalized by the idea of there being a dome in Chicago.
Brutal.
Truly awful.
It is brutal. Okay, Steelers. I think Steelers and Ravens, a lot of the same arguments. I think this a very good job here. I think just the difference being Lamar Jackson versus unnamed quarterback here. So Pittsburgh Steelers, I'll say that the same names. Jesse Minter, Brian Flores, Chris Shula, Robert Saleh, like you said. This is the tier, I think.
I think the Steelers, they seem to really want to go defensive minded. They're still in the steel curtain mindset, I think. They want young. I mean, Minter's not that young. Jesse Minter strikes me as the Steelers.
I like this.
Cycle is what I would say.
Yep, I see no other reason to say Jesse Minter here. Falcons, Kevin Stefanski. I think it was like Connor Hughes out of nowhere, I think, was mentioning that he's the favorite just because he was tracking the Giants, and it was kind of like Stefanski or Harbaugh for the Giants, and the other one is Atlanta. I think just reading between the lines, it seems like the Falcons job is a little bit higher on list than like my list. I don't know if you have like any insight on why that would be or if you disagree.
I think it's just because it's a rich organization, very rich owner. He gives you a lot of leeway. Like, remember, they kept Thomas Dimitroff way longer than anyone thought they should. They kept Mike Smith way longer than anyone thought they should. There's been more instability of late. But Arthur Blank, kind of like Mark Davis, I think he wants stability. He wants to kind of be hands-off. I don't know how truly hands-off he is, but I think it's viewed as like a team that is willing to spend, a team that is willing to give you autonomy, and a great big market and all that. I just think, that's one reason why people in the NFL are maybe more interested in the Falcons position than fantasy players.
Yeah, it's an interesting spot. At least he's only on the sideline for like the last 5 minutes of the game, but you feel
he does come down the sideline.
He's looking weird. It's weird.
It's always odd.
He's got a long coat and not a lot of smiling going on. Just kind of staring into the abyss.
Yes.
So you have to get used to that. But aside from that, I do think it's a good enough job.
Yes.
Raiders are my number 6 opening here. So we have Kubiak available. We have the Rams coordinators. Somebody else. Kubiak feels good.
He does. I think the Raiders too. They've tried the big swing thing so many different times. Maybe aim a little lower. Not that you should be aiming low or whatever. Like, don't try to solve all your problems with one hire, basically. Right. Like, you've got Brady. Who knows? Maybe he can help. But like, just you're bringing in a number 1 overall pick quarterback. Hire a head coach who can be the de facto quarterbacks coach. Something I said earlier with regards to the Ravens. But Kubiak makes so much sense for the Raiders because maybe he's not the coach in 5 years, but all that matters to this organization right now is developing Fernando Mendoza. Bring in a head coach who's going to work one-on-one personally with the quarterback. I think Kubiak would make a ton of sense for the Raiders.
Kubiak would be fun because they don't do like a bunch of the RPO nonsense, and that's what Fernando Mendoza did. So if you can like kind of steal both sides of the equation 100%. There on offense, I think that would be a lot of fun there. So I think they got to go offense there. I think if it's not McDaniel, I do think that Kubiak would be really fun there. So we'll go Kubiak there. Dolphins are my last, serious enough, head coaching jobs. And this one's still not my favorite either. They hired the GM who comes from Green Bay. So everyone keeps saying Hafley. I think if Hafley is getting a job, this would be one of his options. Shula, would the Dolphins just say we're doing Shula? Let's bring him in here. Let's get the grandson in there. Any other names that make sense to you?
Well, I feel like they should go the Scheelhaase, or however you say this. But
yeah,
they already did that. They're not going to do that back to back.
They can't.
They already did that last cycle with McDaniel. Well, as we're talking through this, none of these guys really make sense to the Dolphins. I mean, maybe Stefanski. The Dolphins are another team. They're starved for respectability. They just want to not be a laughing stock.
Yeah,
but I don't think they're getting Stefanski. I thought the Dolphins should have been the Brinks truck team for Harbaugh. I really thought they needed to Brinks Harbaugh down to Miami, and cause they wanted that with his brother. And I'm just a little surprised they were not in the mix on Harbaugh at all. Going through our list, despite liking a lot of these guys, I don't know who I'd play matchmaker with the Dolphins. They're one team, them and the Cardinals, right? I have trouble visualizing who the next coach of this team is.
Do you think it'd be offense or defense? They have if they can retain their current defensive coordinator, but he's being somebody that can be poached away.
They just seem like the classic. We went offense last time. Let's go defense this time, guys.
Okay.
They have a new GM though. They do have some new. That was a team that needed some new blood, some new energy in the front office. So I guess I should give them the benefit of the doubt. But I could see a Stefanski. I don't know why the Dolphins aren't Brinks trucking guys. They're a really rich organization. I feel like they should have been trying harder for the bigger names on this cycle, and they don't seem to be doing so.
I worry that the other coaches realize how many years away the Dolphins are, and then just when you think, hey, the Patriots are going to be down, and then here comes Drake May, and you still have to deal with Josh Allen. But LaFleur said that Hafley is getting a job, and Hafley knows this new GM. So I guess I'll just throw Hafley in there as most likely
6-11 waiting.
It's very uninspiring to me. But we're kind of running out of names here. And that brings us to the maybe my favorite part of this entire podcast. We have to find somebody willing to take the Arizona Cardinals and Cleveland Browns jobs. I'll throw out one here. Vance Joseph back to the Arizona Cardinals. He knows the owner. He doesn't know the GM. There was no overlap there, but he's a serious person. He at least has some experience with the owners. Maybe he would say, I'm never again going over there with the Bidwells. But I don't think that he's going to get very many serious options for the rest of his career. And his defenses have been really strong. That's 10 straight years where he's either been a defensive coordinator or a head coach. His one stint with the Broncos, his quarterbacks were Case Keenum, Trevor Siemian, and then Brock Osweiler. So not exactly he got a fair shake over there. So maybe this was his last opportunity to have a real head coach.
He's a guy like Spagnuolo too, where he's basically always had success when he's calling plays on defense. And
he's definitely good.
He's definitely good. And it is weird to go back to some place where you were fired. But as a coordinator, and I guess that was part of a whole staff firing too.
Yeah, that's when they just didn't retain him. Yeah. They fired Cliffs. They let him pick. The next guy picks his staff. I don't know. I
could see, I'm telling you, the stalking horse here, I think Tennessee or Arizona, I could see Mike McCarthy. I just feel like they're going to be like, we need someone who knows what they're doing. Okay. And I could see it being McCarthy season in either one of these two places.
Okay.
Cleveland, I think to me, they're going 32-year-old guy.
Oh, okay.
I think Cleveland's the one. We're going to hire Davis Webb. We're going to hire Grant Udinsky, however you say his name. Scheelhaase season. Yeah. I think the Browns, they know what a fiasco their setup is right now. They always want to be innovative. They just never are. I feel like they're going to go into next McVay mode. We must find the next McVay. Okay. It's kind of what I think the Browns are going to do.
That's a really good read. That would just totally match up with Andrew Berry, who's definitely won, the power struggle over there. So Harvard, 38-year-old GM, bring in a 32-year-old unnamed DJ. I think that's kind of a good. He just has to convince them. That would take a lot of convincing for some of these guys. So yeah, Arizona, more of a veteran. Gannon was not experienced enough. Cliff was too inexperienced. Let's go back to Vance Joseph for Arizona.
No, it's going to be McCarthy,
or McCarthy. We'll have both of them. Maybe it's McCarthy, OC, Vance Joseph, head coach. One of those situations.
Yeah,
Cleveland Browns. You want to go Nathan Scheelhaase?
Yeah, or Davis Webb, maybe.
Davis Webb. I like Davis Webb. We haven't even talked about Davis.
Yeah,
Webb.
I know. Or even Udinsky. Is that how you say his name? The Cohen
Grant
guy?
Udinsky. Yep.
He's
Cohen
30 years old.
McConnell. It's crazy.
Yeah,
I know that everyone loves that guy. Like Josh McCown, like he got a random head coach interview a couple years ago. There's some other names. Aiden Durde, the defensive coordinator, like for the Seahawks. He's another one. Mike LaFleur, could we go back to the well? There's definitely some unnamed guys that we haven't really mentioned that have a fighting chance for the Cleveland Browns.
Sure. And the McDonald tree, I'd be looking there. Not to put him in the McVay bucket already, but a guy who just seems like he knows what he's doing, has worked for some of the best coaches in football, seemed to immediately know how to apply the lessons. And I would trust like his eye for coaching talent, Mike McDonald.
Yeah, definitely so. Okay, well, let's just do Davis Webb because I think it's pretty fun.
Yeah, that works.
Davis Webb. They're gonna have to sell somebody. They're gonna call enough people. Maybe they get down and it's you and I calling plays over there. Who knows what happens? Ultimately a very fun cycle. I think LaFleur is probably going to keep his job, but that's another one where it seems to be like the money. I'm not sure if you had like a good read on that. Like everything I'm seeing, it's like, could they agree on the right number? I think it might come down to like the Packers kind of lowballing him.
Yeah, so they might be trying to squeeze him maybe, where they have no intention of firing him, but might sense leverage. Like the fan base is unhappy right now. And like they can use that as an excuse to squeeze him, but that would also just be making a bad situation worse, I feel like. And they should probably just pony up.
Is there any head coach that would lose this next week where you think that his seat would get hot? Like, do you think McDermott bombs another year?
I feel like they should have fired McDermott for several years, but he is pretty darn good. The Bills, it's not that I don't think McDermott is a great coach. They're to me, the Broncos with John Fox. Like, we don't know how many years of this window we have left. We've tried the same thing 7 or 8 years in a row. Like, it is worth, even with the very real risk, we downgraded head coach. We just need to try something. We need another pair of eyes in here.
Yeah.
And I thought the Bills needed to make another pair of eyes change, really, honestly, 2 or 3 seasons. But he does add value on his side of the ball, though.
Definitely.
Sean McDermott.
Definitely.
It's just a team where, like, realistically, you have 2 or 3 years left of Josh Allen's prime. And I would try another solution there at head coach, but I understand not doing it.
Yeah, we didn't even mention Joe Brady. He's another, kind of younger name here with some experience. Not my favorite, but a lot of people seem to like him. Let's be honest here. He can evaluate talent. Going to Burrow and then Josh Allen, I've seen better merchants.
Horse to hitch his wagon to.
That's absolutely right. All right, when is your GM head coach full rankings columns come out? Those are always just legendary pieces. Yeah,
I try to drop the coaches at the sweet spot between free agency and the draft. It's like early April. So free agency's over. We're not in full blown draft mode yet. Give people something to read then. The GMs I try to do like 2 weeks after the draft. I used to do it before the draft. Now I've started waiting till after the draft just to have more complete information. Yeah. And having another child this spring, so I hope this doesn't really affect that. But I've been called the Phillip Rivers of fantasy.
Yeah, you have experience at least. Though I do. You'll be able to adjust.
Yeah, but they're coming out spring. Spring is what I say.
Hell yeah, yes. Yeah. They're like one of those cannot miss columns every single year. What about next couple weeks here with Roto World?
Really appreciate that, by the way. Thank you very much. I do a seasons in review, which I don't know. People don't necessarily seem like they're always like, man, I'm ready for next season. But try to put a bow on everyone's season. All of that coming up. That's the main article I've got coming up right now. Roto Football Show. Still going. We're going to be at the Super Bowl. Are you going to be there?
No Super Bowl. Yeah, Josh is busy raising a child. That's right. I guess I am too. Now that I think about it. That's right.
So I'll be coming at everybody daily from Radio Row in a few weeks. But those are the main things I've got going on right now. Taking the show on the road. Nice. Dropping my seasons in review article. Hopefully the day after the Super Bowl.
Hell yeah. Cool. All right. Well, it's always busy on the news side. NFL news, Roto World. We got you covered over there. I'll be back next Monday. I think I'll do a film review after, the divisional round is all set. And then we'll get into previews and who knows what else I'll come up with. I think I might do like a top 20 overall rankings for fantasy next year with Davis Maddock coming up. Wow, so subscribe, throw out a comment and whatever you guys need to do. Buy some Omaha steaks or whatever we're selling out there. We'll see you next time. Peace.